The Elite come out to celebrate, and they beat down Christian. Jurassic Express runs down. They too are beaten up, and the crowd starts chanting yes. Omega addresses the crowd. He doesn't care about their hometown heroes. No one is at my level. The only people with a chance to beat me are either not here, retired, and the big line, or already dead. And with that, the lights go out, and Adam Cole comes out. And this was like a legitimate surprise pop, I think, for people who were totally expecting Danielson here. Instead, Adam Cole comes out in an all-elite shirt, resurrected.
All-elite Bebe shirt.
Yes. Cole stands up to Omega, but then super kicks Jungle Boy, embraces the Elite, and the Bucks lay the biggest kiss on his cheek. Dude, this visual was amazing.
It was so great. So great. Like the pop off the top was great, but the super kick was what really cemented it. Because I think, again, people are expecting Bryan. Having Cole out there is awesome on its own, but it's not Daniel Bryan. But having Cole as a heel and having Daniel Bryan, like Cole as a heel to me is far more interesting than Cole as a babyface, even though eventually I think he'd be a great babyface. But having him not just be a heel, but be a heel to join the Elite, his best friends in the Young Bucks, his former Bullet Club stablemates in Kenny Omega and former Bullet Club alumni, I suppose, in Gallows and Anderson. Like, that is so incredibly perfect, completely reignites that group no matter how many titles they've lost, and sets up for some great feuds down the future. Okay.
All the focus on like ticket sales for Cincinnati, the rating on Wednesday, all of that stuff. Dude, I want a really great Being the Elite.
Oh,
Adam Cole being reintroduced.
The chemistry between, like, I don't know how many people watched Being the Elite when Cole was on, but like the chemistry he has with the Bucks, I mean, not just like in ring, but like as they're filming backstage skits is remarkable. So yeah, I certainly hope, like, they need to show the seance. You know,
they should do an episode where they bring him back from the dead, and it's still 2017. None of this has happened. What? Like he's being brought back at the time that he was killed for being the Elite.
Okay, and then how did they get him to the present?
Well, that's for them. I'm not giving them all the ideas.
Wow,
they can figure out how to bring him back to the present.
What I found interesting was like when Kenny like did the, you know, either alive or not retired or dead, like making reference to the BTE thing. I mean, it wasn't necessarily a line that I think was meant to elicit a huge reaction from the crowd, but I was curious to know how many people in that audience got it. And I think plenty. You're talking about the same crowd, probably very similar crowd to like the ones that showed up at an All In. Like, you know, we're talking about a crowd that packed that arena, same arena, just from BTE. So they probably all understood it.
And it's also one of those lines that, again, for like an inside choke, it's like, if you didn't get it, it still makes sense. It's just a throwaway insult.
Yeah.
So Cole does his story time, indicating no one is going to stop us. And Kenny goes to give the farewell when Flight of the Valkyries takes over the arena.
I think it's Ride of the Valkyries.
Oh, I'm thinking of
Flight of the Conchords?
That's what I'm thinking of. Flight of the Conchords should have played.
So I mean, much of at least some of the expectation from our Zoom chats was a Final Countdown. Did you have one preference or another?
I mean, it was either or. I mean, it was like, I think either one. The issue with like Europe is that, like, it's a really long song to have to wait for. Like, to me, that's like a cool entrance to play at the end of the night. But if they were standing in the ring for like 4 minutes until like the big part, like you have to almost like edit the song for your purposes of a wrestling entrance that is, it's a guy showing up as a surprise, and you know, you got to walk out within 15 seconds.
That's a very good point. I think it works for ROH. But, like, you know, it works if you're going straight to DVD, but on broadcast, it's probably more expensive than, like, you know, this whatever version of Ride of the Valkyries was.
Maybe, like, if he closes the show, it's like they play that for the live crowd.
Off air, I suppose, yeah.
You can get away with it. So out comes Bryan Danielson, obviously inspired by Brock's return because they got the exact same hair.
Yeah, the same man bun.
Yeah. And he comes out and he aligns with the baby faces and they attack the Elite. We got Danielson nailing Nick Jackson with the Busaiku knee and then a big stare down to close the show. And this crowd was just, it was just pure bliss for this crowd that got to see everything on this show.
It was just AEW chant, and really that was
that was really telling that it was an AEW chant as this was happening. Like that was a very notable moment of the show.
If it wasn't going to be an AEW chant, it would have been a Tony Khan chant, because this was this crowd showing their gratitude for what they gave this audience tonight. They put a lot into this show for them, and they didn't have to. This show was already sold out. I mean, obviously, like, you know, we're talking about pay-per-view, so they needed to, like, put something big on it. But to deliver surprise after surprise after surprise in the form of, like, Ruby Soho, Danielson, Cole, like, these are all things they could have paced themselves and saved for another show. And they dumped it all out for this one night. And that, to me, makes the show completely legendary.
Before we go to the phone calls, one big note that they did make a mention of is that the next pay-per-view has been moved to Saturday, November 13th. So it avoids UFC 268, which is the big show at the Garden, and the Canelo Alvarez Caleb Plant fight. So I thought that was almost like you had to at that point once those two big events were happening the same night. And it was the smart move to make. But I imagine logistically, it's not like you just snap your fingers and suddenly it's like they've got to run St. Louis a week later. It's the live Rampage. Like all of this stuff can be done. It's just, it's when you've got all of these dates booked and you're putting tickets on sale, I mean, it becomes tricky to like move a pay-per-view a week. But the right call to make for AEW, because in theory, if that's Omega and Danielson, I mean, that's going to threaten this show.
Certainly, absolutely. So November 13th is presently at least 2 months away. You know, potentially 2 months to build to that. Arthur Ashe is when, John?
September 22nd.
22nd. So that is 2 weeks away. So I'm just trying to look at like what sort of big tentpole events that they have coming up. But, you know, it's a lot of weeks of Rampage, a lot of weeks of Dynamite that I'm sure they can make feel, you know, they're trying to maintain this million rating. And simply with the roster that they have, they're in very good position. Do
you think, given the fact that Newark was originally going to be the War Games, I don't know if I see them doing War Games, but you really do get the sense that they're building up this like Elite versus like these four baby faces.
Yeah.
Like I think it's a lock. Obviously, you're not going to be able to keep Danielson out of the ring until the pay-per-view. I think they're going to go right to that. Mm-hmm. And maybe they feel Newark. I mean, it's like 11,000 or so tickets that they've sold, and that's going to need a big show. And maybe just you do an 8-man or something like that, and that's Danielson's first match.
It's not a bad idea at all. Yeah, that would certainly be a hook for that show.
Home run show. I thought this was like a really classic pay-per-view. I think it's going to be very, very well remembered. I think it's going to break their pay-per-view record. Full Gear, I mean, that's been a tougher one for them during like football season and such. But nonetheless, it's like, man, they feel red hot coming out of this show. And now it's like riding this and into the fall, which is going to be really, really intriguing to look back and see what this night means in historical context for the company and what level it takes the company to. Like all the big pieces are now in place, and now it's time to play all of these pieces on the board.
Yeah. Do you think we see any reaction from WWE? Like how?
That's it. I mean, I think it will be a very interesting game once some of these deals come due, and how aggressive WWE is in wanting, like, this is all one-way traffic, and there is a perception issue now that I think WWE will want to combat, and they have the resources to do so. And the question will be, like, you know, throwing money at a lot of these like big name free agents once contracts come due. And for the AEW talent, like, they'd be foolish not to play both sides. And there's leverage there for this is an amazing time for performers.
It is, yeah. And on top of that, like, I'm really curious to know what sort of deal Bryan has struck, you know, because we know people, when they come into AEW, they're often able to wrestle anywhere else. And much of the rumor with his WWE negotiation is wanting to work New Japan. Do we start to see some news about that, in the weeks to come?
I would be stunned if Bryan does not do New Japan. Like, that seems like that has been
And
that
where
guy's
else?
big plan for the whole time. So yeah, I think that's certainly going. And I'm sure that was an incredibly attractive option with AEW, the fact that they now have that relationship.
Absolutely.